Ray from Bridge Marina here. Doing a quick video in regards to winterizing a boat engine, or more particularly maybe an inboard outboard. I get a lot of questions or inquiries about, like, do I need to winterize my boat, or what does it mean when you're winterizing? Like, folks are curious about the process, those that don't know how it works, and probably can see a bunch of stuff online, but we thought we'd give you a little bit of a clue. The big thing to remember here is your engine, or this particular engine, is actually using water from the lake or from the bay to cool it off. And it sounds a little weird, but what's happening is there's a pump on the drive, on the lower unit, or some boats will actually have the pump inside here, but it's mechanical and it's pulling water up out of the water body to cool itself off, because with combustion, it's having a bunch of explosions in here and it's creating heat, and this engine or this block gets hot. And that raw water cools that off. What happens is that water comes up, actually comes into this area here, which is basically a distribution area where it pushes water to the engine block and cools off that engine block. It pushes water to these exhaust manifolds and cools off those exhaust manifolds, and then it spits it out the exhaust into the water body. And the challenge with that is when you turn the engine off, it actually holds a bunch of that water, because there's what we call a water jacket, which is, it's built inside this block, and that water jacket holds water when the engine's off. It doesn't all come out. You may have noticed I'm holding some blue plugs in my hand. This thing's a Merc Cruiser. And that water jacket has a bunch of drains on it, which are these blue plugs. And when you pull these out, it drains, theoretically, all the water out of the engine. But the challenge is it's theoretical. It doesn't drain everything out. There's always little pockets that can be left, either in elbows of hoses or behind a check valve, or different cavities. And that could be dependent on how the boat's leaning sometimes. Or what happens in a lot of the motors is those passages is almost like somebody's heart. They start to get filled in, because when you're running through a water body, let's say you go through a shallow area, you pull sediment out of the water into that engine, you turn the engine off, it settles. This happens over and over again. Like, somebody's running their engine in their slip, they turn it off, it could have sediment and falls, and it settles into some of those passages. And then, not to mention, some of those passages just rust, like they decay. Very often when you pull out some of these plugs, and there's a little bit of an example here maybe, you can see inside that little plug, there's a little bit of sediment left in there. So you can actually sometimes pull these plugs out of the water jacket and no water comes out. You take a small screwdriver or something, put it in there, you'll actually break through rust and or silt, and all of a sudden you can leave your hand there and it'll fill with sediment. And that can get inside that block, and it inhibits the way this thing cools, which is another issue. But of course, it could also trap water in there, such that if you pulled out one of these plugs and you didn't check to see if it was blocked or not, that water wouldn't evacuate from that part of the block. You'd leave it over the winter, it would freeze, crack, and damage this engine. So what am I getting at here? What folks should be doing, and this is how we do it in our service, is, we'll go inside and we'll pull these plugs, probe everything, and drain it to make sure we get that initial water out of the block, as well as any sediment every time. We're actually going to put these all back in a few minutes. Our tech's going to hop in here, put these back in, and then hook this thing up to antifreeze. It's really propylene glycol, but it is an antifreeze. We use a -100 antifreeze, and we actually don't dilute it. And we'll run that through the engine while the engine's running it. And instead of this running on raw water, like out of a lake or out of the bay, it's actually running on this -100 antifreeze. And it's important to let it do that so it courses around that engine. And it's going to go through the entire cooling system, including the thermostat. We want that to open up, and the thermostat is really just a temperature sensor, for lack of a better term, that regulates where the water flows in the engine, or where that coolant flows. And we're going to let that run around as we do the rest of the winterization process, which includes winterizing the fuel system as well as the combustion chambers, which that's a whole nother story. But then after we're done with that, we want to pull these plugs back out and drain it again. And the reason we're doing that is, like, there's no need to leave all that propylene glycol in there. It also evacuates that in the event there was ever some mixture of that -100 and water that wasn't, absolute. It's just the best way to do it. So folks ask, like, the actual winterization process of that block, what is it? It's pretty complicated. It's not a place you want to skimp. It's a place you want to be most thorough, because the challenge is if you don't do this winterization properly, and that engine block or that water jacket gets compromised by a freezing situation where it freezes, expands, and damages that block, replacing this engine, or really what you replace is that long block, could be, an $8,000–$10,000 ordeal. And the challenge with that is it would come out of an owner's pocket. So if you own the boat, you didn't winterize it correctly, you know, it'd be your responsibility to do that. And a lot of folks wonder, you know, hey, will my insurance cover this? Most insurances are not going to cover a block freeze, or you should at least really read your policy to see if it does cover, you know, damage from winterization or lack thereof. So it's really an expensive endeavor if you don't do it right. But when you do it correctly, or you know, a lot of service departments are going to do it correctly using the proper materials, that is, using the proper antifreeze. It's just the safest thing to do for your engine. Along with that, when you're doing the winterization, here at Bridge Marina, we do a lot of other stuff. You know, it's a great time to do your oil. You know, you've got the boat, it's sitting here in service. It is the right time to drain the oil, put in new oil, change the filter, change your fuel filters, which are located under here as well, change stern drive fluids, lubricate everything. You know, that's all part of your winterization process. Test, remove your batteries if necessary. You know, this is the time of year to do the maintenance on the boat so that when it's, you know, nice outside, you want to use the boat, it actually works. So hopefully, you know, provided some information on how to winterize an engine, or how the winterization works, and what the process looks like. And I'll be putting these blue plugs back in, and we'll be finishing this job off just a little bit. Thank you for watching.